Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the RENNSPORT community events here today with the Porsche Cup at Jeddah. And after yesterday's title decider in the Nordschleife, this will be also a last for now, because it will be the last RENNSPORT community event we will be broadcasting for a while. More on that later. But of course, I don't have to bring the action to you alone, because just like yesterday, alongside me in the commentary booth is Tim Ireland.
Hello, Lino. Hi everyone on Twitch. How are you guys doing today? Yeah, a bit different from yesterday. Bit of a palate cleanser, I suppose, after a championship finale. It is a more one-off community event action from us, and an interesting combo you've picked here because it's the Porsche Cup at Jeddah, like you said. So, bit of fun. See what people make of it. And it's always a favourite car in sim racing, so I'm sure it'll be some great action.
Yeah, I mean, the Porsche Cup, I think, has delivered many times throughout RENNSPORT as we now go into qualifying. But yeah, actually the first RENNSPORT community event we ever did, about 1.5 years ago, was with the Porsche Cup at the Nürburgring. And now we are back with the Porsche Cup here at Jeddah, one of the newest tracks we have here in RENNSPORT. And I think it will be very interesting. Of course, a lot of stuff has changed since then, not only the cars itself, but we are running open setup here today for a 45-minute race. I think we have two very hot contenders. Or fiery is also maybe a word you could say for it. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it could be very interesting. And yeah, Jeddah, very tight corners, not a lot of run-off that could help you if you do a mistake. But at the same time, you do get a lot of track to battle with.
It is very much a street circuit, even if it is a newer one. So yeah, there's a lot of walls, which you probably shouldn't be using in a NASCAR fashion to try and get around the corners. But yeah, a lot of different types of corners as well. So a bit of an interesting one for the people who have taken the time to make their own setups. There's a lot of different types of corners. There's some really low speed ones. There's some mid speed and some high speed corners. So a bit of a challenge to get a nice balanced setup for everything. So I'm sure there'll be people who are faster in some sections and slower in others as the race goes on, and that leads to some good overtaking opportunities.
And we are just following Kimi Hapler on his way to start the first flying lap. They got 10 minutes in this session, so there's definitely some time to put in a good lap time. As you can already see by his livery, he does have a lot of experience in this car. Maybe not in this constellation, but definitely with the Porsche Cup car in itself, being a participant in the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Deutschland in, I think it started December 2023 actually.
I think it was 23, yeah.
Yeah, and carried into early 2024. Yeah, that's a long time ago.
It is, especially in a developing game like RENNSPORT. So a lot of things have changed since then, but it's still a Porsche Cup. So yeah, he's definitely got some experience at driving it, and he's quick. So I'm sure he's got a bit of an advantage from that.
Well, the first sector is already looking quite neat. I think his biggest opponent for the day, he just brushed the wall slightly. Not a big problem here in qualifying, but in the race you don't want to do it. But Rondenhood is back. Very quick, and I think you can say the same about both Kimi Hapler and Rondenhood. They are not shying away from a gap. And I think especially at Jeddah they have shown that in the past. If you think about the season opening race in RCL Season 6, then yeah, it could be interesting.
Yeah, I think Porsche Cup racing as well, you've got to be fairly forceful with your overtaking moves, with it being the much lauded equal machinery, even with a bit of setup changing that the guys are able to do now. But yeah, you do need to be a bit forceful with your overtaking move to make sure you get it done. And it might play into these guys' hands, or it might end in tears.
Whatever it will be, I think is pretty sure about, or I think what's pretty certain is that we will see some action here today. Piotr Zadybel on his way to finish his first flying lap into the last turn. A tiny bit early on the throttle there. The car very understeery if you throttle too early. Generally, a car you really balance on the pedals more than on the steering wheel.
Yeah, it's a car that's got its aero balance very much, at least in a standard configuration, its aero balance is very much towards the rear of the car and doesn't really have much in the way of front aero, and obviously a lot of weight in the back. So throttle on during the corner, not exactly your friend.
Ronenhood on his first valid flying lap now. A bit down on Kimi Harplan's Sector 1. I think his goal for this qualifying session will mainly be to be on the front row. We've seen yesterday that this might be the deciding factor in the end. But actually Quickhands Sector 2, which is a lot of high-speed turns, lesser the slow-speed exits of Sector 1.
Kimi's current lap is a very low 205. I think he said on Discord he's been doing 204s in practice, so expecting to see him dropping a couple of tenths at least before the end of the qualifying as he comes around to finish another lap.
And another purple sector in Sector 3, only 2/10 behind Kimi Hapla, who just improved, putting Ronenhood a further 10th away, but not much separating these two drivers, especially on a very draft-based track as Jeddah. Piotr Zadybel and Radoslav Pironkiewicz in P4 and 5 also not separated by much.
Enrico Bräuninger taking his customary spot just behind the leading group, but ahead of the mid-pack group. Even in qualifying, he takes the Bräuninger zone.
That's a good point, but he got his teammate right behind him, Michael G, putting it in 4th with a 2:10.1. Of course, that's a bit down on the leading two cars, but I think Kimi Hapla and Ronenhood are a bit in their own league here today. I think what would be interesting to see is what Timothy Fritsch can do. He seems to struggle a bit in qualifying, but being a runner-up in the Florida Beach 500 hypercar class, he sure knows how to drive, and of course we know that he can drive. So that plus 79 seconds is mostly due to doing a pit stop. So I'm looking forward to what he can do in the race.
Seems to have done a bit of damage to his car, has he?
Yeah.
Or is it just the lighting?
Yeah. And David Baker is back.
Yeah, David Baker still adapting his way from moving from controller to steering wheel. But it's good to see him carrying on. And I'm sure he'll pretty soon get up to pace with that.
The drivers are
Chestu Monera seems to be joining the Michael G. Radoslav Pionkovic group right now. And Piotr Zadybel, all very close together.
Indeed there, and I think Timothy Fritsch also just improved past David Baker. But the drivers are now on their final flying laps. We only got about 1 minute and 20 seconds left on the clock. So Ronenhood finishing out his final lap with a 2:05.1, but Kimi Hapla improved to a 2:04.5. Let's see what Cesco Monera can do. He maybe can get closer to Enrico Bräuninger. The first two sectors seem like they're a bit off pace to Enrico Bräuninger, but with a great 4th sector like Ruan did earlier, still good chance for him to get closer or at least secure P4. Dennis Kurzer also put it into 5th. Today with 2 RRT drivers, Kimi Hapler and Dennis Kurzer. Piotr Zadalbe improving to 6th, pushing Michael G down to 7th. Cesco not improving on this lap. I think Radoslav Pionkic won't be able to finish this lap. But that means we have Kimi Hapler on the front row alongside Rowan Den Hurt for this RCE. Now what do you expect going into turn 1 with what we have experienced in past races?
I'm hoping not carnage, but I'm expecting carnage. I think there's going to be a fairly determined fight from Rowan Den Hurt to try and get into first place coming early into the race, and maybe a few rash moves from the back, people trying to make up a few places, but hopefully it's not too bad.
We will find out just in a moment as the red lights turn on. And we go racing in Jeddah with the Porsche Cup. It's been a good getaway from both cars on the front row. Also a very good getaway from Enrico Bräuninger, being able to keep 3rd place. Rowan Den Hurt trying to squeeze Kimi Hapler on the inside, but losing out. And now it's Enrico Bräuninger with the chance to even take the lead, side by side with Rowan Den Hurt here. And Kimi Hapler out in front. We see multiple cars going too wide and a bit of contact as well going into turn 3. The number 4 car off the track here, rejoining just behind Timothy Fritsch, who already made up 3 positions in that opening phase of the race. But it's been super close between the top 3 at the start, as we see Dennis Kurz unfortunately tumbling down the order.
Yeah, I think Dennis Kurz on a bit of a spin there. Unfortunate. Maybe a bit enthusiastic on the throttle early on in the race with a little bit cold tyres.
And the question will be who can settle into their pace early. And it seems like both Kimi Hapler and Rowan Den Hurt have a slight pace advantage over Enrico Bräuninger. We've seen that in qualifying before. But further down, David Baker under pressure from Pete Koslick, one of the newest members of NGS RT. Very fast part of the track, nearly reaching top speed while going through these S-bends and then a hard braking zone while turning.
Unfortunately, David Baker picking up a drive-through for a start infringement, so he'll be having to pass through the pits at some point in the next few laps.
Of course, not really what you want to have this early in the race, but it's a 45-minute race, as now Koslick is diving down the inside, and they're also trying to get past Michael G, who's just in between the two of them. It's a bit hard to distinguish, of course, with the cars looking pretty much the same. But Koslick now passed both Michael G and David Baker, who's now trying to get past Michael G, as we go nearly 3 wide into turn 1. And Koslick around after a slight contact and hitting the curb. So let's go back to the front. Kimi Hapler leading by 1.1 seconds. It isn't the biggest margin. Oh, and Enrico Bräuninger with a huge shunt exiting the S's.
That's going to be effectively race over for him. He's going to have a big old pit stop to fix that up.
And further drama in the fight for P4, as Timothy Fridge is also jumping past. Couldn't quite see who that was, but we expected the action to be a bit further up front, but the mid-pack really not giving each other an inch, and Enrico Browninger really with a very stricken car after that hit into the wall.
I think it was Piotr Zadybal. No, it was Enrico Browninger, I think.
But as a Zadybal though under pressure from David Baker now. And I think Piotr Zadybal running a bit wide, David Baker now with more speed. Is he able to take advantage of it? He is a bit stuck now through this long left-hand corner, but if he's feeling confident on the brakes, remember he still has the drive-through penalty, but he still want to have some fun in this race. Braking hard into the last turn, but Piotr Zadybal just a bit later on the brakes. And that was a very close call. As David Baker now peels into the pits. But Timothy Fridge coming from P9 or P10, I think, on the grid, up into 4th after 2 laps of racing. And also Cesco Munuera climbing up that spot past Enrico Browninger. Certainly not what we expected, but well, in a certain way it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were expecting some carnage, to be sure. It's maybe not in the positions we were expecting it from, but it definitely happened.
One in hood also with some damage though. The front left quarter panel very beat up. Also the light not working. As we will go into the darkness, well, at Jeddah doesn't really matter that much. It doesn't necessarily get dark around here. But
there's a lot of trackside illumination. You should be fine.
He should be very fine. But still might not help with aerodynamics. And Timothy Fridge closing in on Cesco Munuera, so he's trying to go for that podium spot. Enrico Browninger in the pits. Dennis Kutzer also still out on track after, I think, coming into the pits to repair some damage.
Yeah, there's a couple of people in the pits right now, repairing some damage.
We've seen yesterday how staying in the race can really pay off a lot more than just being fast. I think today with a combination like this, the Porsche Cup on Jeddah, maybe even more the case. As we have Elvis trying to hunt down Piotr Zadybal, who's been under a lot of pressure so far this race.
Yeah, Elvis was just ahead and then ran wide coming in through one of the chicane sections, and Piotr Zadybal managed to sneak his way through while Elvis was off track.
And Michael G in big issues, I swear. Punting a bit of a hole into the front right of his Porsche. And
Yeah, that's not looking like a healthy Porsche.
Seems like he's a bit right-hand down as well.
Yeah, he does seem to be pretty right-hand down. So I'd expect to see him popping into the pits.
The long left-hander, the back-end part of the circuit, very tricky with this car, because you can't get onto the throttle too early, but you kind of have to balance the car throughout to maximize the power of that flat six. Isn't really easy to make up ground through there. Timothy Fridge just behind Drakosh BK, so a left car. Car in front of him though, that is Cesco Munuera. That's the man he's chasing down.
Yeah, Jackash, one of our early pit stoppers after a bit of a meeting with the walls.
I don't think it will be the last this race. I mean, Jeddah, as said earlier, it doesn't really give you much of an apology if you
No.
manage to mess up. But Elvis has
Yeah,
dropped back past David Baker, now in 9th.
yeah, he doesn't seem to be having a good day's racing around here at Jeddah. I wonder if he's what was I going to say? If he's maybe not quite as familiar with the track.
Yeah, especially
Having a little contact there with David Baker, but letting him continue.
where I think it's a bit of a miscommunication here between the two now. Don't think Elvis wanted to give David Baker a little visit to the rear end of his car. Did the cool thing by waiting, but I think David Baker didn't want to have him raid behind. But Kemi Harpler out front, 5.2 seconds the lead, with nothing but clean air in front.
Few people out there seem to be struggling with the understeer on the Porsche Cup here. Obviously, if you're going onto the accelerator, it takes the weight off the front tyres, and it is a car which very much understeers if you're on power at the wrong time. It's more of a coasting car, I think, for the corners.
Yeah, I think out of the modern GT cars, so GT3, GT2, Porsche Cup, GT4, all those kinds of cars, the Porsche Cup is one of the rawest cars, if you can say it like that. It really does respond to your inputs very directly. It doesn't pad them out with aerodynamics, or of course it has a certain amount of aerodynamics, but it is still, when you drive it, very direct to your inputs. And
yeah, you need to really work on the weight transfer to make sure it's where you need it at this specific time.
And it really gives you the feedback as well. You can really feel when front is going light, when you accelerate, when you put load onto the tires while braking. And that is really something you kind of need to maximize, as Kimi Hapler is doing a bit of a drift as well. But it makes it very tricky, and the skill ceiling is very high. But at the same time, I think a very interesting car compared to the other GT cars you have.
Yeah, it's a very different skill set, isn't it? It's you can't jump into it and expect it to drive like a standard GT3 Porsche.
There's the question if they need to do a pit stop, and no, there are no mandatory pit stops. So people who have pitted mostly did it due to damage. Nico Bräuninger out on track. I say only, but I mean, after such a pit stop, I think he had 50 seconds of repair or something. Only 45 seconds behind the next car. He's still in to make up some good ground. And the gap between Cesco Maria and Timothy Fritsch has stayed pretty consistent throughout. So not much changing in that regard. But it's also getting darker, and the moment when the lights turn on, it feels very weird as a driver. Can tell you that.
Yeah. If you're one of these people who do the ill-advised shadows as braking points, the lights turning on can really ruin your day.
Yeah, definitely not only with braking points, but generally you suddenly feel like in a very, very different environment. And it can kind of throw you off for a second. Most people will get back into their rhythm fairly quickly, but some of them may take some time to adjust. Of course, you don't have the factor night with illumination like this. But still, it's just different. You see now, if we go on board with Kimi Hapler, you have clear shadows, you have this orange hue which you expect in the evening, and suddenly everything turns white because of those hundreds and thousands of bright LEDs shining down on the track. Chesco also still holding firm in the third place. Timothy Fridge, we mentioned it before, runner-up in the Florida Beach 500. He started this race down in P9. He is up into P4. And he's still chasing down Chesco Moreira. Would be a very good weekend for Chesco, wouldn't it be, if he can hold on to that third place?
Yeah, after his good result yesterday in the Nordschleife League, then if he can get a podium spot here, that would be a pretty decent haul of points, if such a thing existed for him.
One thing that I find very interesting, of course we have a one-make series, but we have 4 different teams in the top 4. And it's actually all our active teams as well. David Baker also still soldiering on, even with that hole in the back end of the car that Elvis left him there. Doesn't seem to bother him too much. But I think, as this is also the... It won't be the last RENNSPORT community event, they will come back, just in a slightly different form. But for now, this will be the last broadcasted one for some time. And I think it's interesting how also the events themselves developed over time. As we started in the stream, we said that the first RC is about 1.5 years back. Porsche Cup at Nürburgring, we had... I can't quite remember. I think we had Remco Major in there, we had Nico Nünninghoff. And that was basically the fight we had for the race. And seeing with some of the RCs that came in between, having insane fights and sign-ups. If you think about the 2-hour at Spa with the Hypercar and GT3, the all-cut road races, both TCR, Mission R and the GT3 M2 combination. Generally lots of interesting stuff we could just try out in these events. I think it's cool where all this has come to, and ending it with the Porsche Cup here at this track I think is pretty fitting.
It's almost like you planned it that way.
Not necessarily, but also seeing the drivers develop. I think one of the stories we bring up a lot of times is, of course, the one of David Baker coming from Gamepad, coming to wheels and pedals. Oh, as we have a bigger pile up here in Sector 2. Not quite sure who this is. It's the 12 car. That's Drakash BK, but can't quite see who the other car is, as we just have the lights turn on the track. May have been Radoslav Pironkevich or Dennis Kurza. I think it was Dennis Kurza, judging by the look of his car. But coming back to David Baker, I think it's one of the best things we have in RENNSPORT is that you can develop from a gamepad to a wheel, which you don't really have in many other aspects of sim racing. And of
No,
course,
and it's a very good way to kind of like make it more accessible to people who want to try sim racing out, but don't want to outlay quite a large amount of money to get the hardware required.
yeah, and it shows that it can really pay off. I think David Baker made himself known as a very good and fair controller player. And now with the wheel, he's running in very respectable pace. And generally has adapted to it very well. Showing that you can take the step. And generally impress on both hardwares. So I'm looking forward to what the console will bring. Because I'm sure there are many aspiring racing drivers or sim racers who also want to start out somewhere.
Yeah, and there's been some really good console racers coming up through the ranks over the years into like kind of esports racing or even real life racing, with or without wheels.
I think nobody ever started out on the wheel. I think everybody started on a controller somewhere.
Yeah. I've known some very, very good controller racers in other sim racing games over the years, so I'm expecting there to be good races here as well, and hopefully they find their way to our community events and onto the cast.
Meanwhile, Rondon Hood seems to struggle a bit. He's dropped down to 28 seconds to Kimi Hapler. He has some more damage to the rear of his car. Just behind him is the number 2 car of Enrico Bräuninger, who is a lap down, but you can see how much more pace he has. The rears on Rohan's car seemingly very, very cooked.
Yeah, Rowan's pace has really dropped off. His last lap was 10 seconds slower than Kimi Harpler. And still 6 seconds slower than Chestu Manera, so he's not out of the woods as far as a definite second place is concerned just yet. And I'm sure Enrico Bräuninger catching him up will be a bit of a wake-up call for him.
Yeah, but he also can't repair the damage because he would drop down to at least P4, maybe even P5, depending on Picos looks for the race. In front of him, that is Elvis, so they are both quicker than him currently. The question is, does Enrico
still?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say there's still 23 minutes left, which is like 10 laps, and if he's losing 10, well, his last lap is actually 2:08, so it's not too bad. So he's maybe losing 4 seconds a lap. So that's 40 seconds over the rest of the race. Of course, that's the kind of head math you can't necessarily do while you're still driving your car.
The big question is that as this is actually a fight for position. I can't talk anymore. Position between Enrico Bräuninger and Elvis, as Enrico Bräuninger is going through on the inside. The big question is, do the tires get even worse on Rohan's car? Will he lose more time progressively, coming closer to the end of the race?
That is true. His car looks quite bouncy. You can see some of the people who've softened up the front to try and mitigate some of the understeer going through the corners. You can see the front dives a lot more coming into braking zones compared to people with stiffer front ends. I've been trying to keep track of who's running what kind of setup, but I've got to admit I kind of lost track.
Well, what we can definitely see is that Rondon Hood is sliding a lot more than he was at the start of the race. Especially out of those medium speed turns. The rear is just stepping out, he has to do a lot of counter steer. And either it means that his setup is very aggressive on the rear tire wear, or that the balance of the car due to the damage is really thrown off very badly.
And it's already a fairly twitchy car, so anything that messes around with the balance could come to bite you at any point, really.
Michael G is also closing in on Piotr Zadybel to what it seems. And good comment in the Twitch chat is that one always slides, which is true to a certain degree, but I don't think it's that severe most of the time. Gap between Chescomune and Timothy Rich has opened up a bit. Went up to 4 seconds for some time, now back to 3 seconds. So it seems like Timothy Fridge is quicker overall, but as soon as he gets into some kind of proximity to Chesco, he's really struggling to get closer. Again, going a bit deep into turn 1.
Yeah, he's lapping pretty quick. And his last lap he was a tenth quicker than Rowan de Horde, which we know he's got a damaged car right now. But he's got a good pace advantage on Chestu Monero when he holds it together and does a nice quick lap. But he seems quite inconsistent right now.
Kimi Hapler out front though, absolutely unbothered by all of this. He's just putting in lap after lap, still in the 204s.
Yeah, his last lap at 204.8, his best lap at 204.4, so he's not quite on his best lap pace, but he's not far off it. He just seems to be happily increasing the gap lap after lap, making sure he's got enough of a cushion in case something does happen.
In front of him that should be David Baker, and indeed it is. The damage very similar on Rowan's and David's car, interestingly enough. But David Baker, with 20 minutes left to go, should still be in range for Enrico Bräuninger if he can get through and keep his pace up.
Yeah, Enrico's got a couple of seconds on him pace-wise, so it'll be a while before he catches up, but very possibly.
Kimi Hapler now diving down the inside into the hairpin. Again, Timothy Fritsch is losing time exiting turn 2. Another 3/10 again after getting close to 2 seconds to Cesco Monera.
Yeah, he seems to be having trouble breaking that 2-second barrier, doesn't he?
Enrico Bräuninger now running pretty much on his own. Ron and Hood is a good way up the road, so he doesn't have to worry about that. But it seems like he's having a lot of understeer. Turned a lot for the turn, but the car just wouldn't grip up front. So either he overpushed the fronts, or he's expecting too much from the car, too much throttle through the turns. Whatever the issue may be, he's struggling on pace as well. Timothy Fritsch now 1.8 seconds back.
Monera seems to be keeping a fairly consistent pace right now. He seems to have found kind of a rhythm that he's happy in. Timothy Frisch just kind of speeding up or slowing down depending how that specific lap goes, whereas Chestu seems pretty consistent.
slight tap off the wall there from Timothy Fridge exiting the last turn. Seems like Fridge has a bit more top speed though on the straight. Maybe a lower downforce setup.
Maybe.
Some with a much better one through turns 1 and 2. Still lost a tiny bit of time to Cesco Monoera, but not as much as the previous laps. And he still has 60 minutes left to go. Can take all the time he needs, and I think he's very aware of that.
Yeah, he doesn't have to be making the move right now. He's not going to be catching up to Rowan de Hoordt, but he's not going to get caught by Kozluk, so he can kind of pick his moment to make a move here.
Yeah, Kozluk kind of settled into his spot on the track. It's something that we usually say about a different driver, but he had a lot of action at the start of the race. I think that's a good way to put it, but after that really settled just into 5th, putting down his laps. Peter Zadaibu has been catching him a slight bit every lap. So maybe he's having a shot at it, but with those two being teammates, I don't think they will go at it with full power all the time.
Timothy Frisch getting within a second now, so he's seems to have got his kind of consistency a bit more in check. And he'll start looking to see where he's quicker or slower than Cesco Monoera, see where he can make a move.
I feel like it could also have had to do with tire preservation. Both Timothy Fridge and Dominic Ladler, I think, are drivers who can really take care of the tires and deliberately take a bit of space to just keep their tires in check and attack late on. Of course, both now with BST, which is a very interesting thing to see both of them end up there. But you can see Timothy Fridge can really unlock some pace now from the Porsche Cup car, and maybe Cesco Monoera is a bit locked in place now with his tires.
Yeah. Timothy Frisch's fastest lap is about a second quicker than Cesco Monoera's, so he's definitely got the pace when he wants it. And he's hovering about a second over his fastest lap, so is Cesco Monoera. Frisch's last lap was a second quicker than Cesco's.
In front of them, they're closing in on that is Enrico Bräuninger, who's having a big slide, and I think Enrico Bräuninger completely shot his tires over the last few laps. He's having no grip on the rears, the front is not biting at all going into the turns. So really not the greatest race for him here today.
No, it's not where we'd usually expect to see Enrico Bräuninger in this kind of event.
But the gap to David Baker has shrunk nonetheless. It's down to 26 seconds with 30 minutes left to go.
Yeah, he's running about just over a second quicker than David Baker right now. So he's going to have to find some more pace if he wants to get that gap down to kind of overtake territory.
But the night has fully arrived.
And David Baker's just gone into the pit, actually, with some pretty monstrous damage. So I think that could answer that question.
Through goes Enrico Bräuninger. I think Radoslav Pironkic also in the pits currently to repair. Piotr Zadaibu also down to 4.5 seconds to P. Kozluk.
Yeah, and he's running just over a second quicker than Kozluk right now, so that gap is well within a kind of like territory to make an overtake before the end of the race. Oh,
and Enrico Bräuninger off in the S's near the Ferris wheel. I think he didn't hit the wall, but yeah, you can see the car's just sliding all over the place. It's not abiding to his command at all. So maybe for the last 11 minutes it would still be worth it to come in, get some fresh tires and give it another shot.
I was going to say before that Monero and Fritsch were just catching up to Enrico Bräuninger, and him being on track could be an interesting situation as far as overtaking is concerned. But now he's spun, so I don't need to.
Just delayed you, so it wouldn't be the case anymore. Timothy Fritsch again within a second. Bit of lift and coasting as well. Fuel is not a topic in this race, but lift and coasting can also put some stress off of your tires if you do it correctly. Going for a very late apex through the final turn. Ten minutes left to go. 5, potentially 6 laps. That all depends on where Kimi Hapla is. And with a sizable lead of 63 seconds to Ronda and Hurt, that is a big gap. But we can see, if we watch Ronda and Hurt, that just behind there's Cesco Moreira and Timothy Fritsch actually closing in on him.
Yeah, you just overtook a couple of back markers there, and you put him a little bit offline and slowed him down, and that's given Timothy Fritsch a chance to catch a ride up. He's going to be well into kind of slipstream zone, and that's going to help him no end.
So all 3 of them now starting to fight for the podium. Timothy Fritsch with a bit of a drift through the long left-hander. Didn't cost him too much time, but he has to watch out to not wear down his rear tires too much. Because you ain't getting tire life back in this.
No, and he's not got a lot of time to back off and let them cool down either. You won't want to, with the gap being a second right now.
Piotr Zadaibe also just 1.5 seconds back from Pico's look. Run and hit again with a super big drift into the final sector. Elvis only 1 second back from David Baker as well after they've done their pit stops for repairs. So things are heating up late in this race.
Cesco Moreira seems to really pull out the gap along the fast last sector of the track compared to Timothy Fritsch. You managed to get kind of 4 or 5 tenths out of there. So I wonder if he's running a bit of a lower end setup, or if Timothy Fritsch does some aero damage.
There have been some wall taps, maybe they accumulated to some damage. For Wanda and Hurt, he has 4 seconds to Cesco Moreira. And yeah, it won't be easy for him to defend with tires like this. He's sliding a lot. So he's trying to evade.
His last lap was nearly 6 seconds slower than Cesco Moreira's, which that's only kind of a lap or so gap at that pace.
Oh, Enrico Bräuninger still struggling a lot. Timothy Fritsch seems to really maximize the exit of the medium speed turns. He's now gaining down the I couldn't say really backstretch. They're still corners, but since they are flat out, doesn't really matter that much.
I'm sure Rowan Dunhode is looking at the delta between those two and eagerly hoping that it closes up and they start fighting.
It would basically be a safe and grace. But this lap doesn't seem like Chesca really closed in a lot.
No, Rowan got back on track there and he did a 2:08.6. Chestu did a 2:08.5, so not really a lot of difference in that lap.
Timothy Fritsch also closed in a few tenths again to the Spaniard.
The next car up the track from Rowan Dunhode is Dennis Kurtzer, which is 15 seconds. So I don't suppose traffic's going to play much of a part in the next couple of laps. You should have a pretty clean run to the end of the race.
Meanwhile, Piotr Zadybel got past Picoslook fairly quickly. Kimi Hapler is just behind them to put another lap on them. Or the first lap. Actually, they're still on the lead lap. And as it seems right now, if he decides to slow down, as we
Rowan
have...
Dunhode, who's stopped on track there. And that's let Chestu Monera and Timothy Fritsch get past. Rowan's car looking even worse for wear. Trying to style it like an Aston Martin.
I see where the vision comes from. Spinning out of the long left-hander. But yeah, Chesca Monera now up into second, Timothy Fritsch in third, but the gap between the two of them has grown to 3 seconds.
Yeah, I think it was. I think Timothy Fritsch gave Rowan a bit of a tap as he was getting past. Rowan's car was kind of sideways across the track, so maybe lost a bit of time getting past the stricken Rowan Dunhode there.
Oh, but Kimi Hapler's also around in the same spot, so the rear tires on all the cars really going downhill. Well, not sure if that's the right word to put it. They are basically completely shot on most cars.
Yeah, I think the some of the hard driving earlier on in the race is taking its toll now, isn't it? They're probably looking pretty toasty.
And it seems like Chesca Monera and Timothy Fritsch took the right strategy by just staying out of trouble, keeping their tires in check. They haven't been pushing abnormally high. And they are both in good contention here. Not only for the podium, but I think Timothy Fritsch, if he can put some good laps together, he's run a bit wide, but if he can put some good final laps together, he may have one final shot at P2.
Yeah, he's managed to drag that gap down quite considerably, so he's closing in pretty quickly on Chestu Monera.
Unfortunately, we can't quite see what exact damage the drivers have, but I think it's very fair to say on Jeddah with a lot of very medium and high speed left-hand turns that the front and rear rides are the most used. So the uneven balance is also quite tricky on the acceleration on this car. And I think it might be... No, not quite. We will have one more lap after this one with Kimi Hapler. So 2 more for Chesca Monera and Timothy Fritsch.
Unless he decides to wait, he has got 65 seconds. Well, it doesn't seem to be yet.
We have seen it yesterday, but I wouldn't count on it this time around.
No, that's true.
We have a car in front of Timothy Fridge and Cheskamania, that is Dennis Kurzer. Run-in Hood coming in to repair the damage, as it seems. And that should promote Piotr Zadaibel up into 4th. Pikosluk up into P6. Question is, does Michael G also slip with through? Here comes Kimi Harpla across the line to start the final lap of the race.
Gestu's done a good job of holding off Timothy Fritsch up until now. It'd be a bit sad to see him lose it on the last lap. But Fritsch is not in an overtaking situation yet, so he's got a while to go.
He's certainly pushing. But Cesco always seems to have an answer. Kimi Harpla went through this race pretty much without any mistake. Of course, the slight spin at the end.
Yeah, he had a bit of a slow start, but he quickly managed to keep hold of first place, and he's been a pretty much flag-to-flag victory for Kimi Harpla here.
Meanwhile, Wanderhood has dropped behind Michael G as well. So it looks to be a P7 finish. Kimi Harpla running a bit right here. But now one final time through the long left-hander, past the harbor. In front of him, that is Piotr Zadaibel, the last car to remain on the lead lap. And Kimi Harpla will win the RCE here in Jeddah with the Porsche Cup car. The livery, I think, is not only proof, but shows why he deserves the win. And basically a flawless execution there from the Swede.
Yeah, it was a good race from Kimi. He's going to be pretty happy with that one, I think.
And
Chestu Mineira's managed to drag the gap out from Timothy Fritsch, so I don't think we're going to see any change of position there.
but a very, very good weekend for Cesco Moreira. I think he can be very happy with it. I think he would have gladly taken P4 in this race, but P2 of course is much better than that. So congratulations to Cesco Moreira for P2 and Timothy Fritsch completing the podium. It wasn't due to a lack of trying.
No. It was a good fight from Timothy Fritsch, though. He seemed to, it wasn't like wheel-to-wheel racing, but there was like a little bit of a stagger in it, but they seem to have a good fight for pace, those two.
And Rico Breuninger crossing the line in 8th. Maybe not the race he would have hoped for, but sure made the most of a very disappointing start to the race for him. Or not the disappointing start, but the mistake earlier on. think he showed that he would have had good pace throughout.
Yeah, he definitely had quite good pace. His fastest lap was a 2:08.8, so that would have put him more in the kind of 3, 4, 5 position.
Piotr Zadybel just across the line to come home in 4th. I think he should also be pretty happy with that. But yeah, that has been the RCE before we go into a bit of a break in terms of RC. But we will have some replacement events, more on that, well, not next week, but the week after on Monday. Monday the, what was it, 8th? Monday the 8th of September. We will have some news to share with you on a new league coming. And yeah, any final words from you?
No, not really. It was a good race. It was some exciting times. I think we had kind of what we were expecting at the beginning. There was some action, some tyre wear problems, a little bit of hitting some walls, which we mentioned a few times at the beginning of the race. So yeah, good race. Thanks for everyone for taking part, and I hope to see you in the next one.
Until next one, have a good time when we go to RCL next Saturday, and then goodbye.
Goodbye.